The morning sun spilled like honey over the cobblestones of the castle town, warming the stone walls of the royal kitchen and filling the air with the scent of yeast and rising dough. In the great hall above, Princess Fiona pushed a sugared plum around her golden plate, her appetite as absent as her interest in the visiting prince from the Northern Isles, who was currently detailing the lineage of his hunting hound. Later, free from the gilded cage of courtly duties, Fiona slipped down the back stairs. She pulled the hood of her simple woolen cloak over her fiery red hair, a crown she was all too happy to hide. Her destination was a small, warm shop on Flower Sack Lane, a place whose humble charm was worth more to her than all the tapestries in the castle. The bell above the door chimed as she entered. The shop was a symphony of simple pleasures: loaves crusty and golden, plated brioches gleaming with egg wash, and pastries that flaked at the slightest touch. Behind the counter, a young man with flour dusted on his forearms and a smudge of chocolate on his cheek looked up and smiled. It was not the practiced, political smile of the court. It was a smile that reached his eyes, crinkling them at the corners. "Good morning, Elian," Fiona said, her own worries melting away. "Fiona, you're just in time," Elian said, his voice as warm as his oven's. He reached for a still warm loaf, the crust crackling softly as he broke it. "The first of the day. For you." He handed her a piece, and as she took it, their fingers brushed. It was a touch as light as a falling petal, yet it sent a current through her. This, she thought, was the real thing. Elian didn't see a princess. He saw Fiona, a girl who loved the crunchy heel of the bread and the way the morning light fell on the flour-dusted floor. Their friendship had bloomed slowly, over months of stolen visits. He had first seen her not as royalty, but as a sad-looking young woman hiding in a shop from a sudden downpour. He had offered her a cinnamon roll and a seat by the window, and they had talked for an hour. He had listened to her complain about the endless etiquette lessons without a trace of awe or fear. He simply treated her as a person. His kindness was not a performance for a princess. It was the very fabric of his being. He saved the day-old bread for the orphans by the river. He knew the name of every customer who walked through his door. But a kingdom, especially one run by a council of stuffy nobles, runs on whispers. Soon, the whispers became a roar. Princess Fiona, seen entering a common baker's shop. Princess Fiona, laughing with a tradesman. The news reached the king, her father, who summoned her to the throne room. The queen wrung her hands, while the royal advisor, Lord Pemberton, a man whose blood was as blue as his velvet doublet, looked on with thinly veiled disgust. "Fiona," the king began, his voice weary, "the council is troubled. This friendship with the baker." "His name is Elian, father," Fiona said, her chin held high. "It matters not what his name is," Lord Pemberton interjected, his voice oily. "It matters what he is. A commoner. It is unbecoming. It damages the dignity of the crown. The people will talk. The neighboring kingdoms will hear." "Let them hear that their princess is kind to those who feed them," Fiona retorted. "The final straw," the king said, holding up a letter, "is this: an invitation for the baker to the royal midsummer ball. It was found among my correspondence. Did you send it, Fiona?" She had. She had dreamed of dancing with Elian under the stars, of showing him a world beyond his ovens, if only for one night. "Yes, father, I did," Lord Pemberton scoffed. "A baker at the royal ball? The thought is preposterous. He would be a laughingstock. He would know none of the dances, none of the customs. He would be lost, and he would embarrass us all." The word struck Fiona like a physical blow. She hadn't thought of it that way. She had only thought of her own joy, not of the impossible, uncomfortable world she would be forcing him into. That night, she went to Elian. The shop was dark, but he was there, working by candlelight, preparing his dough for the next morning. He saw her face, and his smile faded. "You've heard," she said. He nodded. "The town crier might as well have announced it. Princess befriends flour, dusted fool." He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "The invitation, Fiona. It's beautiful, but it's also a little terrifying." "Lord Pemberton said you would be a laughingstock," she whispered, ashamed. Elian looked at her, and his gaze was steady. "He might be right. I know how to knead dough and judge the perfect rise. I don't know a waltz from a minuet. Your world, Fiona. It's written in a language I don't speak." He paused, wiping his hands on his apron. "But I would be a laughingstock for you. I would walk into a room full of people who think they are better than me. For you. Because the language of my heart, when it speaks of you, is the only one that matters. Tears welled in Fiona's eyes. Here was a man whose courage was not in a sword or a title, but in the simple, profound offer of his true self, flaws and all. The night of the ball arrived. The great hall glittered with chandeliers and jewels. The nobility, in their silks and satins, moved with practiced grace. And then, the doors opened. Elian entered. He wore his finest clothes, a simple, clean tunic and trousers, a far cry from the velvet and lace around him. A murmur, a ripple of smothered laughter, passed through the crowd. Lord Pemberton smirked. Fiona, descending the grand staircase in a gown of shimmering silver, saw it all. She saw the smirk on Pemberton's face. She saw the pitying glances aimed at Elian, and she saw Elian, standing tall, his eyes searching for her, his kind face open and unguarded. He was not a laughingstock. He was the only real person in the room. She walked past the flock of eager princes and lords who had gathered at the bottom of the stairs, waiting for her. She walked directly to Elian. The music swelled, a beautiful waltz. "May I have this dance?" she asked him, her voice clear and steady. He looked at her, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "I told you, I don't know the steps." "Neither do I," she said, with a sudden mischievous smile. She took his hand. "Not these steps," and she began to dance. Not the formal, rigid steps of the court waltz, but a simple, joyful sway, a dance of two people holding each other. The court was aghast. The king and queen stared. Lord Pemberton's face turned a shade of purple rarely seen in nature. But then, a strange thing happened. Elian, guided by her, began to move with a natural rhythm. He spun her, gently, and she laughed. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated joy, a sound the gilded hall had not heard in decades. It was infectious. A young lady, in waiting, tired of the pomp, tapped her foot. A minor lord, who had married for love and regretted it for status, felt a pang in his chest. They weren't dancing the waltz. They were dancing to a different tune, the music of two hearts beating as one. And in that moment, under the glittering chandeliers, Princess Fiona and the baker, Elian, taught the entire kingdom a lesson. They showed them that grace is not in the pointed toe, but in the gentle hand. That worth is not in a title, but in the courage to be oneself in a room full of masks. When the music stopped, there was a stunned silence. Then, one person began to clap. It was the king. He was not clapping for the dance, but for the truth he saw in his daughter's eyes, a happiness he had never been able to give her with all the princes in the world. Soon, others joined in, a hesitant, then genuine applause. Lord Pemberton stood frozen, his world of rigid order crumbling around him. Elian looked down at Fiona, his eyes shining. "You didn't have to do that," he whispered. "Yes, I did," she whispered back. "You were brave enough to come. It was time I was brave enough to show the world what my heart has always known." From that night on, the whispers changed. The baker who loved the princess was no longer a scandal. He was a symbol. He was proof that a kind heart is the truest nobility of all. And in a small, warm shop on Flowersack Lane, the most valuable treasure in the kingdom wasn't gold or jewels, but the simple, perfect love between a princess and a baker, a love measured not by status, but by the boundless generosity of the heart. Moral: true love is measured by heart, not status.